to another season of the Angler Journey podcast. I am your new host, Hailey DeMers, and today I have with me Matt Dennis and Michael Stepp with Handlebend. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, today will be really fun. We're going to dive into the story of Handlebend and how you guys went from a copper mug to a 14,000 square foot building. So let's just dive in right away. If you guys can start by telling our audience a little bit about your story, how Copper Mules became a 14,000 square foot building and the impact it's had.
That's a
big question.
Tall order, yeah. Matt, you want to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Matt and I guess from the beginning, Matt and I are UNL grads. We both went to small colleges, separate from each other. We were grade school and high school buddies from the same hometown. Went to small separate colleges for some sports and things, and then eventually ended up junior year back together on the UNL city campus here in Lincoln. During that time, lived in a bachelor pad together for a couple years with a couple other buddies, and the Moscow Mule was kind of resurging in American pop culture. It was becoming more and more trendy, and as such, the copper mugs were kind of hitting the market, and we just decided de facto that we needed a set for our digs here in Lincoln. So did a little internet research. Probably dating ourselves a little bit, but the internet was a different beast than it is now. I don't even think Amazon had really caught on yet, so eBay was like the reigning king. So I bought a set of new copper mugs on eBay.com and shipped them to our house. They showed up, and they were kind of the what most folks are familiar with, the dome or bubble-shaped copper mug. They were stainless steel on the interior and just had a faux copper plating. Quite a bit of money. I think they were $35 to $40 a piece, and we ordered either 4 or 6 of them. So it's a substantial amount of money for a couple of college dudes. And so we boxed them up and shipped them back to whoever we bought them from. Got a refund. Kind of tabled the idea of our own copper mugs. Fast forward probably a few weeks, and I was back home in our hometown for the weekend. My dad's career has been in HVAC and commercial refrigeration, so grew up with a random pile of scrap copper in the corner of the workshop. It was just never a big deal. I got the idea one Saturday afternoon to start kind of sorting through that. Found some copper that I could chop up, heat up, kind of bang into shape, and over the course of the weekend built a copper mug. That then I toted around, back to Lincoln to our house, showed it off. I was pretty proud of it. Matt has a little different perspective of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was still super cool because you made it, but I mean, the thing was this big with the same little tiny handle on it.
You guys are going to have to send me a picture of that. I need to see that.
It was pretty ugly.
In retrospect. Very,
yeah,
very.
But it was super cool at the time.
Took a huge amount of time. It took most of 2 days of screwing around, trying to get the thing not to leak. And my skill set was, a little different back then as well. So anyway, had that mug, and as cool as it was, Matt wanted one, and I told Matt, I think I specifically said, like, you can have a mug or a set of mugs, but you're gonna build them. So we went back home another weekend, and both
He built
of us,
a better one.
well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we built a set together of 4 for him, and kind of figured out we built a little more design and aesthetic into those ones, and then so at that point Matt had 4 and I had 1, and I'm thinking, like, how does this work? So we came back another time and built 3 more for me, and so now, long story short. We had these 2 sets of mugs that we finished college with, kind of took everywhere. We'd go somewhere for a weekend, they'd come with us, partied with them, hosted with them, shared them with friends, and then enter that stage after college. The 5 years after college, you got 5 or 6 weddings a summer, and that kind of became our gift, I guess, our token gift. If we were both going to the same friend's wedding, we would come home for a weekend, build a set of mugs, take them with, and give them to the couple. So over that period of time, 4 or 5 years, we ended up with sets that kind of made their way out of Nebraska. We had sets in the cities in like Denver and Houston, Omaha and Lincoln, obviously, and started getting lots of feedback from people. They were really proud of the mugs.
So back in, real quick, back in 2017, when I had the pleasure of coming to actually tour that HVAC shop when you guys were still there, and I got to watch you make one, and where you guys were still building the crates down there, and I wrote down off of your website, you called them stainless steel cups wrapped in a chintzy fox copper coating. I'm really curious, what is the science behind a copper mug that makes it what it is, and why they're so popular? Is there a science, I guess, or anything like that?
Well, so that's the big kind of question, and it's actually been in the news in, I don't know, relatively recent history. There was a kind of a surge on quote unquote copper poisoning related to these, Moscow Mule mugs. So we started digging into it, kind of with the deer in the headlights thing. Found out that it was nothing more than like kind of just a topic for mainstream Good Morning America to talk about. Copper poisoning, you're not going to get copper poisoning from drinking out of a copper mug. You're talking about copper dust in an environment where you're exposed to it for years and years and years manufacturing. That's kind of irrelevant, but the science behind the copper is how it acts with the acidity of say limes or those kinds of things, and it's allegedly supposed to add something to the Moscow Mule drink. So you're gaining something in drinking it out of copper versus out of glassware. Now the history behind a copper mug, as we've been told.
Yeah, so that is, that's in I believe it's in the 1940s. The story behind the copper mug, and even farther than Moscow Mule, is that the owners of Cock and Bull Ginger Beer, which was a brewing company.
This is original ginger beer.
Yep. And Smirnoff Vodka, and a gal from Moscow that was peddling copper mugs had all got together in a bar or tavern in LA or a pub.
Near in the Hollywood vicinity.
In the Hollywood vicinity, and they were all like against hard times on selling the vodka and selling this ginger beer and selling these copper mugs, and the story goes that they all got together, made the Moscow Mule, got it trendy in Hollywood, and then it spread from there.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the story. There's different versions of that for sure, but that's the base of it.
So that kind of takes the copper mug and adds this marketing piece to it. This cocktail that they aimed at the movie stars and tried to build their own good fortune, right? So they could start each selling their respective products. So you kind of take those two stories and blend them together. And Matt and I, this is the $1 million question: is there a difference? Like, could you tell the difference in a blind taste test in a mule from copper versus from glass? Like, I don't know. I think it's a mindset and a perception.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something to be said there too. And on a hot summer day, you grab this copper mug, make your cocktail, and the outside is instantly as cold as the ice in the drink, and the mug is sweating. And when you grab it and bring it to your lips, like everything is ice cold. That's a perception and a perspective you're not going to argue with. Like it becomes this experience that you're not going to have with glassware. So whether it's scientifically something in the liquid or not, like it does make a difference. The copper mug is a game changer.
Yeah. No, I only asked because I totally got those mugs, those chintzy mugs for my wedding. And so when I thought back to when I was looking at your copper mugs 5 years ago, and I'm looking at this chintzy mug, I'm like, darn, I wish I had one of their mugs right now.
Yeah, so we actually have multiples of those mugs you're speaking of as well. At the point back to kind of the transition of Handlebend and the growth, when we decided to take this thing and start a legitimate business with it, we went through somewhere between a year and 2 years of kind of research and development in our processes in preparation for if this thing would actually grow. We have a lot of scaling to do. Like, we can't take an entire weekend to build a set of mugs. And so we were ordering different brands of copper mugs and things, kind of full circle back to, we probably ordered from the same company that we did back in college. But the first thing we would do when those showed up on our doorstep is we would just drill a hole right in the bottom of them so that they were just dysfunctional and they'd never be useful. So we still have a cabinet in our conference room that has all those mugs with holes drilled in them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how did the name Handlebend come to be?
Yeah, so that was a friend of ours that got one of, I don't know if it was the first.
It was the first wedding gift set we ever built.
Yeah, very well could have been the very first wedding gift, and it was Beaver Creek or somewhere around Vail. It was this huge fancy house, and it was a big fancy wedding, fancier than we belonged at, and we gifted them. They were a super big hit. Well, he was a super fan of Handlebend throughout the planning process from when we decided to do it to launch the website, and he just called Michael one day and said they were drinking with or entertaining with friends, and they had just come up with that. And he calls Michael and he's like, "I think this is your name." And Michael's like, I think it is too. So
yeah, the specific conversation is reminiscent of that scene in Dumb and Dumber when he's trying to come up with the guy. He's like swimmy, swammy, slippy. And I remember Nick, it was Handlebend or Handlebend, and he just keeps like rattling, and this was like late at night, after we'd been getting smart, as he calls it, for hours. But then the next morning he's like, "I got it," and he said Handlebend, and we weren't even at the point of like looking for a name yet. I think we had called ourselves Dennis and Stepp Copper Company at that point. But it was just something that kind of stuck, because then like months later when it was time to make a decision, we're like, well, it's got to be Handlebend.
it was pretty easy actually. Yeah.
Right.
So.
I remember when we were talking a while back that you guys talked about the reason you moved back to rural Nebraska and the importance being involved in your community has been for you all. Will you all talk a little bit about what it's been like to move back to rural Nebraska and how your community has had an impact on you?
Yeah, both Mike and I graduated from UNL, and he stayed in Lincoln and worked for a commercial refrigeration business, and I moved to Omaha and worked for a grain merchandising business, and so we both spent a good amount of time. I mean, I bought my first house in Omaha, and Michael bought his first house in Eagle, Nebraska, which is just outside of Lincoln, and just did that realm for a while, and it was awesome. Love both those cities still today. I moved back before Michael. I probably spent 2 or 3 years in Omaha, and then started to kind of put the pieces together that it was, I was looking at getting engaged, and we were going to start a family pretty soon. So for me, it was that took me back to O'Neill, because that's where and how I wanted to raise our family, is in that setting. The whole access to the outdoors and knowing your neighbors really well, and I mean, driving to work when you're 12 years old, and
Makes a big difference.
Just being able to do that and kind of take the leash off your kids a little bit is what kind of really drove me to back. And then on top of that, I was moving back to help the family business.
Yeah.
So that was also very helpful.
Yeah, my personal experience with that whole thing couldn't be more the same as Matt's. It was we lived in Lincoln, ballpark 10 years after graduating college, and always knew we would eventually move back and raise our family there. My wife and I are both O'Neill natives, and so that made it a little bit easier. Both of our families were there, but it was kind of it was not even on the table to consider raising my kids really any other way. I wanted to give them the same experiences that I had growing up in the rural setting, for all the same reasons Matt just spoke to. And then also kind of started my career down here in the city, and have a father who's in the same sector, and so that was a piece of it too. It was just it eventually got to be time. Our first boy, Brigham, it was right at his first birthday. He was turning 1 year old, and that's right when we moved back to O'Neill and just worked back into the family operation, and kind of had that lifestyle change there. So
Right. So my husband and I, we moved back to Howells, Nebraska, and I think there's something to say about moving back to small communities, and just raising your kids there and being surrounded by family makes a huge difference. How has being surrounded by family and that community really helped Handlebend thrive the last couple of years?
it's been a game changer, and I can't imagine how different Handlebend might be without that piece of it. Both being in family businesses, we've had the advantage of, as we've launched Handlebend and then worked like crazy just to keep up with kind of the machine it's become. There's really been this sense of no pressure because we have that flexibility, and we always have. Our dads are 100% on the same page. They want nothing but the best for us. And so there's been a lot of flexibility there that has given us the resource of time to do what we need to do to make sure Handlebend's taken care of. And I don't think there's any way you could ever put down on paper the changes that's made just with our mentality in running a business. We've never run it from a sense of we need it or there's pressure. You've never had that pressure in decision making, like if this goes south, we're done with. So we have kind of that freedom to make decisions with growth and positives in mind instead of the kind of the scary of having the negative connotations of
Yeah, I think
risk.
a lot of entrepreneurs are at some point they're gonna look down the pipeline and say, okay, I'm working this job, but I have this idea. It makes it pretty handy if you're able to develop that idea while keeping the income stream of another job coming in. I mean, you just jump right into a venture like some folks do. Like there's a lot more on the line.
There is, and I think that's gonna affect your decision making. It's kind of the old adage of like a sports team. Like you can either play to win or you can play not to lose. And if you're handcuffed by a dire financial situation, like you're gonna make decisions differently, and it's probably not the best decision for your business and growth and winning. But you might be in a situation where you don't have the choice.
Yeah, you might. So with Handlebend, it's been really fortunate that we did put ourselves in those scenarios with the support of our family businesses that we could kind of just inch away at Handlebend. It's helped Handlebend because we didn't have to grow super fast. It was just grow it a little bit.
Very, very natural.
Yeah, natural, very organic. Yeah.
And that didn't come without, there was lots of extended periods of time where Matt's always been a morning guy, and he has drugged me along with him by the back of my neck. But there was a lot of mornings meeting at the shop at 4:15 and working Handlebend production just to keep up with what we had kind of accidentally created, just to create that positive experience for the Handlebend customer. And you do that till 7:30. Fly home, help get the kids out the door for daycare and school, and then go to your day job until 5 o'clock or 6 or whatever, and meet back at Handlebend and chop it out, and then back to home to get kids in bed. And so yes, we were in a fortunate situation, but it's kind of a create your own good luck scenario as well, and that came with hard work and kind of burning the candle at both ends for sure.
It reminds me of, like we were talking about before when I was giving you all a tour of our space. I mean, we have students in here who are working at 2 a.m. on their jigs, and now they're in Shields. you know, the story of your copper mug, it goes overnight, and you guys have real lives too. So that's a really, really cool story to tell. Part of this podcast and the mission of it is to inspire the inner entrepreneur inside of you. And I look at your all social media, and it's just hilarious sometimes. But there is times when you can really see that company culture just shining through. You guys do a fantastic job. You know, what molded your company culture into what it is? Because it's when I see it, I see family, I see fun, I see mugs, and I see people sitting around and talking to people that they maybe never chatted with. So talk a little bit about that company culture and how that was molded and came to be.
Go ahead.
So that's a perfect question, because it almost kind of overflows from the last question about moving back to small town. So you're moving back to small town Nebraska and end up with this company that is an unlikely story to come out of small town Nebraska. It's an unlikely business to have in a 14,000 square foot building on Main Street in small town Nebraska. I think most folks would piece these things together and say, man, like, how do you keep good health? It's small town Nebraska, like there's nothing going on there. And it's what we figured out is there's actually a lot going on there by way of talent. And I could talk for an hour on why I think that talent lives there in Nebraska. But number one, it is so awesome to have proven that it can work. We can run this fantastic business model and concept with fantastic human beings in small town Nebraska. We can create cool jobs with a good vibe in our hometown. That's probably the best thing I pull from this today. But as far as the inspiration, that actually, ironically, came probably almost exclusively from a class that Matt and I took together at UNL, and the class was led by Professor Freddie Luthans. And I don't know if he's still a professor, if he's retired.
He didn't teach me.
So it was a business class, and it was geared around company culture, and it was termed, I think, psychological human capital.
Psychological capital was the name.
Yes. So it revolved around the idea of like creating a space where, I mean, money is only a driver and a motivator to people because it has to be in our society. And it revolved around the psychology of like what motivates human beings. And it was just a fantastic class. And we did all these case studies on these big corporate companies that are removed from Nebraska, you know, East and West Coast. And they're, at the time, in the early 2000s, I mean, they were trendsetters. And it's a lot more common now with kind of these tech startups and stuff, the company culture. But at the time, it was like, well, this makes so much sense and no one is doing this. And it was something that kind of inspired Matt and I. And I think it's always been simmering in the background, like someday we're gonna have this space to do this. Like that was our goal. We had no idea what it would be. Obviously, in grain merchandising and commercial refrigeration, like probably not a lot of like room for that kind of thing.
Well, also, like, our dads are two of our biggest mentors, but they're 55-year-old dudes that they didn't see that in how they were running their business and the employees and the culture. There's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, just that old school mentality, and you'll be familiar with it. Like you cannot outwork me. Just try to keep up.
Yep.
You can't get out of the way. You know.
That
And
reminds me of I was listening to Green Lights. If you guys have heard the audio book of Matthew McConaughey's book, it reminds me very much of him and his dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so that class was kind of the seed, but that seed was probably planted and laid dormant for, well, we probably took that class in 2007. Handlebend wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a thought, and then it certainly wasn't a thought of being a legitimate business for another 10 years. And then there was no employees for another 3 or 4. So all of a sudden, you fast forward, the 5 to 6 years of Handlebend's history, and we're like, well, it just kind of the light bulb clicked, and it's like, this is it. We have an employee. So I mean, there's only room for so much company culture when it's like Matt and Mike and Mo. But you fast forward, and as you have needs and as you have growth, like, and resources, we've got, well, we just brought on two new hires that haven't even started yet, and so we've got a building full of 8 people, and it's like we have this thing where we can instill this company culture, and it means a lot to hear your perspective from the outside, because what you're seeing and the vibes you're getting are not by accident. It's actually on the contrary, where it's something we've thought about for 20 years. Right. And so to see that at some level we are accomplishing it, that means a lot.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell our listeners, we didn't get into this yet. It started with this incredible copper mug, and where you guys would ship these crates to your customers, and they would have to use a crowbar like I did before this even started. They made me crowbar our Handlebend crate open, but tell our listeners, it started with a copper mug. Where is Handlebend today? And from that HVAC shop to this 14,000 square foot building.
Yeah, so we were in Michael's dad's HVAC shop until sometime in 2019, and we had so we launched the website in 2017. So we'd spent a couple years in the shop, and he had given us a little portion of the heated area of the shop. We had built a bench and what we needed to start the production.
It was an 8-foot workbench
in the production
in
cycle.
the corner with our old beer pong table bolted to the wall.
Yeah, it has the Memorial Stadium football field with the different,
Painted,
the old different colors.
You guys just took over.
Yeah, we
just took over.
So we took over the corner, and by 2 years in, we had basically kicked Tom out of his own shop. And so we started looking for a spot, and Michael and I had kind of had this building earmarked, and we started to talk to the family about buying this building, and it was a hard no. It was like this building's been in our family since it was built in the 40s, and it's not going to happen. So like we've done about anything else, we just didn't take no for the answer, and just like kept getting to know the family. Michael found out that the son that was operating out of there, a small wood shop, loved Guinness. So Michael would take over a 6-pack of Guinness and just chat him up for an hour on the evenings.
It was meant to be, because I also enjoy it.
Yeah. And so over the time frame of probably a year and a half, maybe a little more, we got to know Kevin Shellhammer, and I kind of figured out over all Michael's Guinness that he had with Kevin that his mom, Marilyn, was the one to talk to. And so with a few coffees with Marilyn and telling her what we were trying to do with the building, we convinced the Shellhammers to sell us the Main Street building in O'Neill.
Yeah, so we closed on that building. I believe it was in like April. It was at the end of April, probably 19.
Yeah.
And this is a testament to Matt, in my business partner. So 8 months later, we had our grand opening, which would have been like, now somebody's gonna call me on my math here, but it was February of 2020.
Yeah.
So in that time, we took this 14,000 square foot building, which was totally wrapped on the inside with sheetrock, all the walls, all the ceiling. We gutted it down to concrete, floor, walls, ceiling, and then had everything built back for 3 businesses and ourselves to move in there. 3 unattached businesses and ourselves to move in there in 8 months.
Right.
We had our grand opening of our tap room, which features all Nebraska brewed beers from some of the more awesome breweries in the state, and all craft cocktails with Nebraska spirits. So we launched that business in February of 2020, and then in March of 2020, as you all know, the history of 2020, we closed the front doors due to COVID with this new business, and had to go back to the drawing board of how are we gonna keep this awesome and keep it rolling. And I don't think I could explain to you how we did that, but we did, and it's been a lot of fun.
So we ended up in that building. We ended up building the front out for retail, and so there's a coffee shop a tap room and a flower shop in the front. And then we have an event space and our Handlebend office in the middle, and then the whole back end is the copper shop now. So, and that was just kind of a necessity. We got the shell hammers to say yes, they'll sell it to us, and then we had spent enough time talking to them that we had to figure out if they say yes, how we're going to make it work.
It's way too much
Because
building
it was
for
way
us.
too much building for what Handlebend needed for the copper shop. So that's how we ended up making it work, and now you come in and you can go to the flower shop and gift shop, or grab coffee, or in the evenings it switches over to a tap room.
Wow. That's awesome. I remember when you guys told me you bought a 14 square foot building, but you're like, man, we don't need this space. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna fill it with? How'd you land on a coffee shop, a floral shop? Was that strategic in choosing those two areas?
Well, it was more a product probably of again, rural and small town Nebraska. There's been so many dollars and human beings flowing out of rural America for decades, and that's been the narrative. And businesses on Main Street in small town Nebraska have been disappearing for a long time. It's not a new story. So it's kind of this sense of community and having each other's backs that has been a little bit more of the Handlebend, I guess, at the center of the Handlebend story from the beginning. And so we just kind of, I don't know, that's what we resort to. And so we just kind of started building this business model around that. It's like, how can we create a space that is aimed at building community, and kind of the concept of a rising tide floats all boats. And so we just started piecing it together. Obviously, you're not going to house like a church and a brewery in the same building. So there's different businesses that probably lend themselves to work together a little easier. And flower and gift shop, there was a couple of those in O'Neill, and we ended up kind of going the long way around on that specific business to have a local one in there. But there was 2 or 3 flower and gift shops in O'Neill, and then a coffee shop too, and then those just naturally seemed like businesses that work together. And we originally were going to have an unattached brewery open, a tap room in there too, and that kind of fell through for a few different reasons right at the last minute, and that's why the tap room, fast forward all these years, it's owned under the Handlebend brand, because we had to throw that together. But yeah, just I guess to answer your question, it's just kind of the small town way. Like we're gonna do this. We're gonna have it be the centerpiece, a centerpiece of O'Neill and of community, and a space where we can build community, a place for people to gather. And there's enough bars in town and restaurants, and we want to try to do it without necessarily competing with folks. And just that's kind of where we landed.
Yeah. That
makes it sound probably pretty simple.
I appreciate the coffee shop because Angler's pretty passionate about their cups of coffee too. So, as entrepreneurs, we all go through tough times. There are times when it's slow when you open a new shop, and then COVID, kind of ruins that whole thing. What is something that has really carried you through the tough times of COVID, of challenges in starting a businesses? There's challenges every day, but what has carried you through the tough times?
Go ahead.
Yeah, when COVID hit, we were trying to figure out this whole building thing, but Handlebend, the copper side, was still doing just fine and growing, and but to carry us, we have an amazing team. Like the team's really good. Everybody's got each other's backs. And then, we reach out to other companies and entrepreneurs that we, have become friends and mentors of us. And they're like, hey man, it's just rolling up your sleeves. Like we were talking to Caleb Pollard from Scratchtown one day, right when we decided that we needed to close down for a little bit. And he just like, guys, you gotta drive through window. Like just start selling drinks out the window. Like, duh. And we're like, you can do that? He's like, it's kind of the wild, wild west now. You can do whatever you want. And so we're like, oh my gosh, like what? Like why wouldn't we do that? So, we named the menu Wild Wild West right after that, went down to Baumgart's, bought them completely out of mason jars. Like every mason jar Baumgart's had in the warehouse,
That's awesome.
we palleted up, brought to Handlebend, and just started serving mason jars of mules out the drive-through window of the coffee shop.
That's so cool.
So just stuff like that, and getting creative, our team, there had to be some switches in what our team was doing, because all of a sudden we had to, we didn't have as much work on the front end of the building, but it was nice because it made us long labor to the point where now we could start working on some projects and processes that we hadn't turned to before. So we focused those efforts to the back end of Handlebend Copper more, and kind of smooth some processes out there, which was really a blessing.
I think I'll just add a little bit to that. Matt made the comment of having each other's backs with our team. And that's a phrase, it almost seems beat to death just because we say it a lot. But that's something that Matt and I knew from day one. Everybody tells you don't go into business with friends, don't go into business with your family. But we just understood that, Matt and I's relationship has worked since we were kids. And we knew it could work and would work, but we knew the foundation had to be, unapologetic communication. Like, there's going to be some hard conversations, but if you don't just get those on the table and get through them, it's really easy to do at the beginning. If you just bury it, it's going to turn into something that comes up down the road, and it's going to be a way worse problem. And so I think that has trickled down into the rest of our team, and so then you end up with this team of individuals who, when you do have the tough times, like, people come together, and we've got talented people, and we've got people that can communicate through the hard times, and so you end up with all these minds pulling the cart in the same direction. And there's really no recipe for how you're going to get through it, but you get through it, and then on the backside you're looking back and you're better for it, and just keep moving.
Right, establishing that trust and that ability to work with each other. This is so important.
Yeah, and nobody likes a hard conversation, but you're a better human being at the end of it for having it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I remember you all telling me the story, and it's pretty ironic because there's not a lot of people who have all 4 of their grandmas still. Tell us the story of how you brought your grandmas in one day.
Yeah, so by 4 you mean like my 2 grandmothers?
Yes, yep, all 4, sorry.
Just to clarify, and Matt's 2 paternal and maternal grandmother are still with us, and so there was a day that, I don't know, that just kind of dawned on us, and we're like, well, that is kind of a special thing, and then we built this crazy idea out of it.
Yeah, we just started like riffing on the idea like that. Hey, we just realized that that's not normal for a couple 30-year-old guys. So we just started riffing on it, and we're like, let's just get them here, like, do their hair, do their makeup, like, make them a bomb-ass lunch.
Treat them.
And
a little bit.
Yeah, treat them good.
I love that.
So that's what we did. And then we wanted to interview them, like, get it filmed.
Yeah. So when we pitched this to them, and we're like, we're trying to figure out a date, they're like, you're gonna do what?
They're like,
you're gonna interview us?
Why would I get my hair done for no reason? And we're like, well, you're not gonna understand until this is done. But they all eventually obliged.
Yeah, but there was a lot of questions. They were pretty nervous.
That's it.
Yeah, they showed up early in the morning, and we just blocked out the whole morning of a local salon there in O'Neill, and brought like breakfast in.
Yeah,
and stuff.
they brought breakfast in. They got their hair done, airbrush makeup, which they were blown away.
That was a trippy experience.
That's
for
awesome.
them. They're like afraid of that piece of equipment.
What is spraying on my face?
Yeah. So and then we went to we actually took them to there's an old depot, train depot in O'Neill. So we took them there to do the filming because this is when we probably were still in your dad's shop, and so we didn't want to do it there, of course. So we just filmed them. We asked them a bunch of questions, made a video out of it. There's some really good content that came out of that, like some good one-liners about their these women's husbands who we are grandpas. Like there's some great content there.
Old time stories.
So it was just a really fun day, and it was for me it was even more fun talking to them about it after it happened, because they were just like they're blown away.
Well, I think your grandma wrote a thank you note, and my grandma's told me in person, she's like, that is just such a special thing that you guys would even think to do that, but then would go out of your way that much to do this for us. And that wasn't even really the point. It was probably more for us.
It was more
at
for
one
us. There's no
point,
question about it. Like, we were doing it, like, actually more for us than we were for them, but it just turned out to be a really cool deal.
Right.
Yeah. And we have these, the token that we kind of ended up with is we have these, it's such beautiful art and photography, but we have these big 3-foot square portraits of our grandma's hands holding a Handlebend mug, and so there's 4 of them in our building, and it's just kind of a testament of, like, you know, when you start to kind of think about lineage and stuff, it's like there's a large piece of each of them probably in me and Matt, and so they're kind of
You're gonna
beginnings
remember
of
that
our
forever.
stories. Yeah.
So we got them, I think the last thing we did is we got them all to sign those pictures. So we
Yeah.
had to figure out which pair of hands was theirs.
Yeah.
Which they were identifying by their rings. And,
Yeah. And it's been interesting, just a couple different times Matt's aunts and uncles or mine have been in there, and from across the room, I mean, from 50 feet away, they can instantly pick out their mom's hands.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's really
a
neat.
fun story.
It's so fun, and I know you all know, but being a part of the band, I mean, and you guys know Matt and Joe Bruger, they're Angler alum as well. When your business trickles into your personal life, this last week I sang for my great aunt's funeral, and it was a song that she wanted sung, and it was called "Jealous of the Angels." But it's amazing when your personal life and your business meet, and the impact that it can make on not only you but your family, and the legacy and everything that's going to go after it.
That's really cool. I'm impressed that you made it through that song without losing.
I've done enough of them that at this point you just don't look around.
Yeah.
You just don't look around.
Just focus
So.
on the song. Yeah.
Right. Well, I want to dive in really quick to a couple of the tactics that you guys believe as entrepreneurs. One of the things I wrote down is, Michael, you talked about unplugging from the e-world, and how back in college you had a flip phone. Sometimes you would look at it for hours or days, but talk a little bit about the importance of unplugging.
I think it's everything, and I think it's this weird juxtaposition that we all probably live in today, that you can't live without it. You know, you have to have that technology. It's a beautiful thing in how it's expanded our world and connected us all, and the things that it's brought about. I mean, I just got off of a kind of a podcast type scenario with Matt and Joe Bruger yesterday, and that's something that we did. It took a half an hour of our day, and that would not have happened otherwise, because we live 90 miles apart, and it would have been something that gets put on the calendar a month from now and then rescheduled, and so there is this beauty that technology has brought about, and it's a nice tool, but you come to a place where you can't live without it, and it becomes such a big part of your life, and it's not good for us. Matt and I talk about that a lot, the effect it has potentially on our kids, and on our relationships. You know, some of the most important relationships in your life, your wife. When you're plugged in all the time, it just brings a lot of stress and anxiety that I think flies under the radar, but it's there, and it's stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. So I think to be aware of being able to unplug from that is essential for our own well-being. But then also, as like you take that and overlay it to where we're at as a society, and you can see the anxiety in people when you have to hold a prolonged conversation for 5 or 10 minutes in a public setting, and it's something that we're losing. Like, it's a skill set we're losing, and our high school kids and our younger kids they're growing up in this world. And so I think, you know, it's one of the things we've really leaned into with our Handlebend building, and it's a small spot on the earth. You kind of wonder, like, can we make a difference? But I think if you stick to your values on that, and that's what we've leaned into, is the concept of unplugging, disconnecting, sitting down around the kitchen table with your Handlebend mugs, or, you know, at the tap room in our brick and mortar store, and spending time with your loved one, with your human beings. You know, I grew up with my aunts and uncles and everybody at mom and dad's kitchen table, and I'm sitting over here in the corner trying to eavesdrop, and because what they're doing is they're telling stories and they're laughing and they're recounting memories, and that's how humans have evolved. Like the story is what we've evolved out of, and so then by doing that, it's like full circle, because while you're doing it, you're making new memories, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just fun times all around, and so. That's kind of my thoughts on technology. It's a necessary evil, but I do think we need to be aware of the negative implications it's having on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like even for entrepreneurs, like with the rat race, what is marketing and what is social media? Like when you leave for the day, shut the lights off at the office and go home, like you still have all that going on. And so if you're sitting there messing with that during dinner with your girlfriend or boyfriend or with your kids, or the kids are playing on you, but you're sitting there checking what's going on with your marketing or your social media, like it's a problem.
Right.
And it's easy to justify because it's work, right? I need to
kind
do
of work. So there's a really fine line of balance there.
It's a slippery
that can
slope.
get you in trouble.
So you all are obviously inspired by something, and so are all of our students, but what is is there someone, or was there a book, or you guys became entrepreneurs for a reason? Where do you think that stems from?
Oh man,
Yeah, I don't know where it stems from. I watched.
I call it a bad habit.
Yeah, it's
Kind of look around
I
and like,
love
what did I
that.
get myself
It's
into?
kind of
What did I do?
Getting to be that way. But I mean, we both grew up watching both our families do it, and there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with it, but there's also a certain amount of you are locked down to that business. That I think we knew what it was, but for me, that the whole aspect of controlling your day and working for yourself and doing what you want to do way outweighs the negative stuff of having to be working that business 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've probably, in my age, I'll admit this, and Matt can probably tell many stories that aren't rated for this podcast, but I think looking back, I've always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for authority. And when something's told to me, my first reaction is, well, that's stupid, and so I would imagine that that's a little bit of what's probably built into my drive to want to do things my own way as well.
Cool. Okay, so as much as I want to sit here and I want to chat all day, we got to wrap it up eventually, but to end it, what words of wisdom do you have for any aspiring entrepreneur, anybody who is already doing it? What words of wisdom do you have for those people?
And I guess mine would be more on it goes back to what I just said on the rat race of marketing and social media. Like I don't chase that.
Yeah.
Like, tell people why you're doing it instead of what you're doing, and I think it's going to go a long ways.
I love that you bring that up because so as I'm joining Angler again and new staff person, one of the classes I want to teach is the importance of relationships and connections, because we just came off of COVID where people were at home sitting on their couches and they work from home. There's no human interaction, and a lot of these students might not have interacted the last 2 years. And so as they come into the program, I want them to be able to realize the importance of connecting with your partner, with your employees, with your clients, whoever it is. I mean, I think that's something that's lost in the world. So I really appreciate that you all have found a way to incorporate that into your business.
Well, in the relationships thing that you just talked about, I last year spoke with different panels of high school students in our hometown there, and it was kind of the same, like what's your advice you could give. And a couple of the things, one is with technology. I mean, you've got an iPhone in your pocket, you can literally learn how to do anything in the world from some of the best people that do it in the world. So pick something you want to do and do that, whether it's you want to bake high-end pastries or, you know, rebuild a 350 motor for a Chevy. Like, you can do that in your free time in high school, and you can be an expert by the time you go to college. And then number two is it's the notion of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that is very, very true. And you can sit here and complain about that and look at someone else and think, man, they're so lucky they have that connection. It's the only reason they're doing what they're doing. But that's not true. Like, you're getting ready to go to college, is what I told these guys. And they said, you're gonna be surrounded by, depending on where you go, like thousands and thousands of students. Get out there, hold your chin up, go build relationships in person. Because these students are all gonna graduate college and they're gonna go all over the country and all over the world. And when you're 30 years old or 35 years old and you're looking to launch this business, you're gonna know somebody that has some pull with who you need.
Absolutely.
And like, you're kind of creating your own luck. Like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, yes. But you are in total control of that.
Yeah.
And when you're 18 to 23 years old, or even younger than that, that's the prime time, man. Go build relationships, have fun doing it, and it's called networking.
Get gritty.
That's right.
Get gritty. Okay, so we can find your mugs online on the website, right? Is there any other place we can find Handlebend mugs?
Well, you can find about everything we're doing. Our marketing team has built a pretty sweet website. So
Sweet.
Yeah, handlebend.com, and then obviously the
I need a
social
hat
medias.
now. My next Handlebend thing is a hat.
Well, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Ah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, with that.
That's right. Okay, and last question I have for you is, how can the Nebraska entrepreneurial community support you?
no.
I mean, I think you're doing it. Just like giving us a platform to talk. It's a little bit mind-bending that we were asked to come here, and it's a little flattering. So thank you.
It started 5 years ago when I got to tour it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how that all comes about.
See, and that's another thing worth noting. Like, we did a good job that day.
Yeah.
And 5 years later, like, you thought to call us and say, hey,
I'd love to talk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, I've appreciated you all guys so much for coming here today and sharing some words of wisdom, having an impact on the Nebraska community and your community, your grandmas, me. And I know this podcast is going to go so far with so many of our students and so many entrepreneurs out in the community already. So I really appreciate your time.
That's great. And a message to anybody that hears it. If you got any questions or whatever, that's kind of the beauty of being a small company. We're accessible, and you can come knock on our door,
Yeah,
give us
come
a
check
ring.
us out in O'Neill.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. If you're watching this live or on video, make sure you take a look at these copper mugs down here. They are something real special. I got to open them today. They even put our logo on them, and they say Handlebend in the inside. So go check out Handlebend. We support you, and we're rooting for you. Thank you.